Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to video game news. Coming up, we have our pre-show with Yu-Gi-Oh! For about 20 to 40 minutes. Then we'll go through the major video game news that catches my interest for the past couple days. And then we will go into looking at all new games on Steam, all of the new games on Steam. And then we will do the headlines for general video game news at the end. So that was just me introducing an attempt at a coming up intro. Like, inherently, as we do the catch up section here and play Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm getting very low watch time averages. I think everybody does that, but I think mine in particular are very low, and so I'm trying to figure out, is there anything you can do? Now the truth of the matter is it's probably hopeless. With just small numbers of views equals small number of watch times. Any successful content creator needs a rabid fan base that is going to watch their episodes all the way through at least once, if not twice or three times. Which definitely has led to the rise of shorter episodes in general versus what YouTube used to be many years ago, where it was just based on views, and a 2-hour long deep dive would be considered fairly acceptable and very successful. So yeah, I'm going to workshop that coming up section at the beginning of these live streams going forward and see if we can get that. I probably need to script it and repeat the script multiple times before I would memorize it. It is clearly just totally ripped from what more standard TV shows would do. Like news shows in particular would do, but it is also fairly common in YouTube videos too, is that you just have this, what is effectively a waste of time at the beginning to just beg people to stay around long enough to see the rest of it. And there's, in that ad-libbed intro I just said, there's some inaccuracies. All the new games on Steam is not accurate, because obviously we're skipping over adult games, and I can't guarantee I actually am going to have my macro work to show me all the new games, or that there's any way to really see all the new games. Speaking of macros, either Firefox or UI Vision, which is what I use to make all of my web browser based, Firefox based macros, have updated, and now it is not working, which totally explains why all of the tabs were out of the correct order before, and totally explains now what's going on. Firefox did update to some point, and it seems like duplicate tabs can now be automatically closed, which would mean one less plugin needed to be used. But with UI Vision broken, that also means any scheduling would have to be done manually, which gives me, I guess, a good excuse to actually schedule some of the videos that probably need more of a manual touch to them as far as pre-recorded footage, instead of having that be automated. But yeah, it is difficult, if not impossible, to install an older version of UI Vision, since it is just a plugin extension through the Firefox extension website. Yeah, and inherently this is an example of a case where it really should have everything set to not update. But yeah, this probably has happened once before too, where an update happens and it's just bad. And that's where the idea of never updating, except for security updates, becomes fairly popular amongst people, people running servers in particular. And the whole idea of an immutable operating system where everything is read-only, except for flat packs, which are sandboxed in their own thing, like SteamOS and the Steam Deck has. That is an intriguing thought, certainly, too, as far as just overall better stability. I would personally suspect what should happen for operating systems is that there should probably be like a hybrid approach where you install a bunch of setup and applications in a non-immutable fashion during like the first couple of installs, and then after say a month, then the operating system just pops up a thing and says, hey, we're gonna make the operating system now immutable and make it read-only, and you're gonna have to go through a whole password verification login system to make it mutable again, changeable, not read-only. Yeah, and at some level it might just make sense to even not update around security updates, but on rare monthly occurrences. If Linux ever did become the default operating system, it would take, I think, a long time though for it to get anywhere as bad as far as security flaws as Windows has. I mean, we had that whole your computer can be hacked if you don't install this patch through Wi-Fi debacle just a week ago or so. And speaking of security, Kaspersky antivirus and security software has just been banned. I think again, I think it's been banned before due to fears that it is too closely tied to the Kremlin, Russia. So it looks like we may just have a one-turn win here. For the catch-up section, I finished the whole Sierra Madre DLC, Casino Heist DLC for Fallout New Vegas, which leaves me almost certainly with just one more episode to just kind of wrap things up. There was 2 locations that only unlock if you make a specific decision to nuke both the NCR and the Legion. Like, if you nuke the NCR, it unlocks the Long 15. If you nuke the Legion, it unlocks Dry Wells. And so you have to do both to unlock both locations in the Lonesome Road DLC. I chose to do neither, which definitely feels like the better move. Is just, hey, let's not repeat the huge mistake of the past. And oh, I could have done a lot more here. They did find a way. And then otherwise, I imagine there's not enough of other stuff to do with New Vegas. Since I just kind of finished all of the main story. Yeah, it definitely doesn't make a lot of sense to do all the DLC at the end, but that's absolutely the situation most of the original people who would have originally purchased New Vegas would have experienced. It's just having no more content at that point. I am happy with my decision to reset myself from level 50 to max level back down to level 1, which in doing some DLC, 2 of the 4 DLCs put me in a it put me in a nice position at like level 17, level 19. Once you finish the Sierra Madre, it warns you of this. You can never go back. So you have to do all the challenges and all the achievements in that DLC. And once you leave the Sierra Madre vault, you can never go back. And inherently, I'm going to spoil a little bit of the ending of the vault, in that, one, it is not a Vault-Tec vault, which would have been the most interesting thing there. But there is a theme of letting go and not being too greedy, which they physically implement in the game, in that they introduce a new item of gold bars in the vault. There are 37 of them, and they weigh, at least with my perks, they weighed 70 pounds each. Now, even in a really good build that has cheated a little bit, I can only carry 290 pounds. So, picking up 37 gold bricks put me at 1,500 pounds, thereabout, plus or minus a few pounds. So yeah, you are immediately encumbered, which severely slows down your ability to walk anywhere. You just walk really slow, and then at the end of the encounter, unless there's just some other way to finish the encounter, which maybe there is, if you can get the exact right talking mechanic, maybe you can end it differently, but I suspect you actually can't in this case. So at the end of the encounter, you have to rush the long way around a map, and you barely have enough time if you're not over encumbered. You definitely don't have enough time if you're over encumbered, so you have to leave most of the gold bricks. I could take 3 without becoming over encumbered. Each of the gold bricks, by the way, worth about, I think it was 1,500 caps, way more than anything else in the game. So there is this theme of not getting greedy and letting go, and they try to mention it over and over again, but for it to physically play out that way, instead of it being really a dialogue choice, which it really should have been, and there should have been warnings to it, even more, it's kind of crazy. And all it really ends up doing is that the game auto-saves, you die, you try again, you die, you try again, you die. You eventually realize there's just absolutely no way you're going to make it from point A to point B to escape before the facility explodes. Did I mention that? So there's a time limit on it if you're over encumbered, which inherently, if you were over encumbered for some other reason than the gold, that would be very unfair also. Speaking of unfair, I think there is also, in the Sierra Madre DLC, before you even start it, a room to the left of, you see this radio, and when you walk towards the radio it knocks you out and starts the DLC. There's a room slightly before that to the left, and in there I believe there is a holotape recording that you absolutely need to get the best ending, which it definitely feels like the best ending is that you come out happy with your 3 companions that you're forced to align yourself with. 3 new companions. But yeah, I was only able to come out happy with 2 of them. I mean, one of the companions has their voice box cut, and it eventually gets healed in the 3rd act, and then creates this weird situation where you really are just paying for a voice actor to work a lot less compared to the other companions' voice lines that were recorded, and you're just working with a fairly irritating character who has to gesture things to you instead of talking, and you get a bunch of subtitles when she spots something or does something. A lot of times you get subtitles of actions that aren't even actually animated, so it is just the subtitles describing things to you in brackets that aren't actually happening in front of your face. And one of the things I would say about the Sierra Madre DLC, and I don't know if it really is called Sierra Madre DLC, but that's what I'm just going to call it, is that it really highlights why you shouldn't just make a cheap ripoff of Bioshock, because it is totally a cheap ripoff of Bioshock. In my playthrough, I saw nothing that explained this toxic cloud that's throughout all of that DLC and nowhere else in the game, and these ghost-like enemies who are fighting you over and over again and seem to regenerate if you don't chop them up real good or get a critical hit on them. But yeah, it is just a blatant cheap ripoff also of Bioshock in many other aspects too. And the funny thing here is I would argue, and almost certainly in the past have argued, that there should have been more ideas that were stolen from Bioshock 1. But if those ideas were stolen from Bioshock 1, they were stolen in a much more natural, less just obvious plagiaristic way. Whereas the Sierra Madre DLC, it's almost exactly the same game, but worse. Like the same visuals and themes are all the same. Yeah, it's kind of the difference between, had somebody blatantly ripped off Bioshock 1, but then they said, instead of focusing in on Ayn Rand and objectivism, libertarianism, as showing just like, this is where the Atlas Shrugged mentality would lead to, they instead made some kind of sharper criticism on a different economic / governmental style. In a lot of ways, I guess Fallout is that argument around, here's what potentially the Vault Tech and capitalism and just corrupt governance from capitalism would lead to, particularly with the Fallout TV series heavily implying that the Vault Tech themselves set off the nukes and that they were effectively just running the United States. And this is what resource wars would lead to. But yeah, if you were to make a sharp parallel parody of Bioshock 1, I'd have a lot less criticism instead of just doing almost the same thing with really no message in the Sierra Madre. Like greed around the casino being a bad thing just doesn't make a lot of sense when The whole game is built around encouraging the player to be greedy. Every single time you run into a room, it is full of items that are worth caps. Every single time you go to the Gunrunner's Arsenal store, you need a massive amount of caps. If I had gotten all 37 of those gold bricks, that would have broken the game. I would have had probably 300,000 caps at that point. And at most, to buy everything in the game, you probably only need close to maybe 250,000 overall, and that's over the entirety of the game. In a lot of ways, what they should have done is made the Sierra Madre a hippie commune peacenik type place where it's just absolute pacifism as a concept being introduced. Of course, that would be a fairly boring game if all the enemies were absolutely pacifist, but you could maybe find some way around that. Maybe just a lot of characters with a lot of cattle prods that would knock you out instead of hurting you. A lot of tranquilizer dodge, things like that. But yeah. Particularly in the Fallout universe where everybody is very much just pro guns and pro violence and racing ahead to the eventual nuclear fallout that Fallout created. A unique DLC area where this is where all the hippies were. This is where all the peace people were. Might make some sense. You could see taking a hippie pacifist idea and it getting evolved over hundreds of years into more violent rhetoric. Or you could just have an area where the hippies just get mutated or eaten by animals. Now, I've said a couple times you can't actually get the 37 gold bricks. There is actually a way to do it. I looked up. It is pretty much a cheat, though. There are these electrical force field walls that come up. And so, effectively, let's just say, if the vault was this square, and the exit was this square, there's like a wall here, and a wall here, and then there's another door over here that doesn't have a force field that then goes around for a very long time and wraps back up here to get to the door, and that's the way you have to exit. But what you can do is take the gold from the vault, stick it against this wall, is how I saw it done, and then just drop the gold bricks, then take a shotgun and just shoot the gold bricks because the items have physics on them and will move halfway through the wall. So the gold bricks could be picked up on either side of the invisible force field in that case. So yeah, with that trick you can just prepare before you start the whole encounter by dropping all the bricks and shooting them here so they're halfway through the force field. Then you're unencumbered, you run around, and then you very quickly pick up the gold bricks and become over encumbered and then have to walk a much shorter distance. It is a tight effect regardless, though. It is not going to just be something you get right on the first try. And with that, then you just have broken the game completely. And so, yeah. inherently you could break the game easier just by giving yourself through console commands on PC as many gold bricks, or just cut out the middlemen and give yourself as many caps as you want. I have purchased, I think, pretty much every gun available at the Gunrunner's Arsenal, although I sold a bunch of guns, so it's hard to tell which ones were available for purchase originally versus which ones did I sell for caps. I've purchased every single mod. There are several mods that have like duplicates on them. Like you get the same mod twice, which is weird. And then there are several items that if you don't find the Gunrunner's Arsenal version of the items, usually you need the Gunrunner's Arsenal version of the items, you'll just never be able to use the mod. None of it really matters in the long run. That is the important thing to put into this, is that you, regardless of what you do, are going to be so overpowered, and upgrading the vast majority of the items in the game, the guns, will not make them powerful enough to actually want to use them. Right, so the question here, can we get through all of this in a one-turn kill? See if this works. Or if this still takes a little bit of work. Yeah, and otherwise, as far as other things I'm doing, not really a lot has been done. My thought of changing how going through the new games and using the middle mouse button to do something slightly different, I think that thought is at least on the back burner and is probably out the window. As far as right now, UI vision being broken, but yeah. I don't think I've really been spending too much time even watching TV. What I've been doing more than anything has been staying up way too late, and then like my sleep schedule's just all messed up again. Staying up way too late when I really can't afford to do that at the moment, and then sleeping into the afternoon, very much the summer days, dog days of summer situation. And certainly, like, I woke up at about 11 in the morning today, and then it is just hours and hours and hours of setup to get to the point where I feel good to record. And I didn't do any pre-recording of anything before today's stream, which I should have. I'm playing way too much on my phone still. The New York Times Puzzles is the newest one, but I'm still playing Tinkafuma as an adult mobile phone game and Memento Mori as a non-adult mobile game with 2 accounts on Memento Mori. I'm getting less focused on doing all the dailies for Memento Mori though. I really wish that those 2 accounts would just merge, or that there was a way to merge them. Yeah. And both accounts have positive aspects enough to them that I wouldn't want to just get rid of the one versus the other. Okay, we may have this. I watched the second to last episode of Akma Game on Amazon Prime, and that really should be a case of not watching that episode because it is a cliffhanger to be continued with the final episode that is going to be out next Friday, I imagine. That series didn't go in the directions I would have liked it to go. There's less focus on the games and more focus on what would have been a villain arc in like a manga that would have been introduced like much later in the series. Or just teased and then ignored. Like, Akma Game is very similar, I suppose, to the animated Yu-Gi-Oh! First cartoon, in that you have the bad guy shown at the very beginning, but then it wastes a lot of time with a whole tournament arc. And see, I'm not even sure. Yeah, the bad guy that they show at the beginning is not even Pegasus. So it takes like a tournament arc or two before you actually are fighting the Blue Eyes White Dragon guy. I forget his name. I want to say Kaiba. Yeah, it's gotta be Kaiba. But yeah, if the entirety of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime series was simply just 6 Yu-Gi-Oh! Card games, that'd be very boring. And particularly in the anime series, 6 Yu-Gi-Oh! Card games would all be playing towards the same goals, whereas Akma Game is a different kind of silly child's game that is different each time. In a funny way, I imagine one way you could have ended Akma Game, and I'll be surprised if this happens, but it could be that the whole thing, all the Akma games, Devil games, are designed to just make people play silly games and respect each other's abilities, or otherwise get along better. Where did I put that there? Yeah, that would be the interesting twist, if all of the talk of taking over the world and killing a bunch of people is nothing, and it really is just to get people to play games. Although inherently that is also Squid Game too. Is that a spoiler perhaps for Squid Game, is that there's just somebody somewhere in charge that wants a bunch of people to play old kid games, playground games, things like that, and they've just added kind of a crazy death element to it. Yeah, I don't think I have anything else to talk about, so let's start covering the news. I'll scroll down here. Gamescom Latin. Apparently there's a Gamescom in Latin America somewhere that Godot is going to. Which, yeah. do vaguely recall them at some point talking about Gamescom Latin. LATAM is how it's spelled. Almost like platinum. Here we have YouTube advertisers saying Happy Pride today and every day. Which I guess this is Pride Month. And so they have several pictures here. In fairness, I've in the past stream criticized LGBTQIA people for feeling like they're not really representing themselves particularly well when it's just like heavily fetish wear, sexy shirtlessness. In this screen, this seems much more appropriate. They're on a beach, shorts is not a problem. Sure, you've got maybe a flamboyant pink outfit here and there, but otherwise I would say this is the normality of day-to-day life, I imagine, for a lot of LGBTQIA people, and this is a better, slightly more professional way to represent yourself. And in this case of a drag queen cross-dresser, I would say this looks like this is being done on the stage in an appropriate venue, and this looks like it's an outfit that's not too revealing. Even here on the stage, this is not that extreme compared to what you would have just like a Britney Spears or pop singer on stage in their heyday, and Madonna. Like, Madonna cone bras is the comparison there as far as what a presenter or singer might present. And then here you have just some more pictures. It does probably say something that you could take from it, in that YouTube advertising is on Twitter totally cool with promoting Pride to their advertisers. And I imagine most advertisers in the West are acceptable and amenable to that. But then there is also entire countries, I think, that would not be so amenable to that. So if this doesn't work, I am doomed. I have to wait till the next turn and then activate this trap. He doesn't have any cards though. Wait, now he has 2 cards. Here we have YouTube advertising just reposting a gender equity at Cannes Lions 2024, I guess is what it is. And here you have, again, just what looks like pretty decent representation, very nicely dressed, modestly dressed women. Yeah, nothing extreme or offensive there. At least to Western mentality, sentimentality. Okay. So this isn't gonna work, I don't think. Yeah, this is the card that was making this a zombie, and as long as this is a zombie and all of the cards in the graveyard are zombies, which they are, then I can't activate my spell, my effect. It is crazy though that YouTube advertisers is just doing all of these twists, these posts at the same time. Yeah, we have Black at Cans experience. And again, seems like that's an appropriate picture or video. Yep. Yeah, you'd think maybe you'd want to spread all of that out, announce it better. Okay, and then in sharp contrast, you have YouTube Gaming here saying who's a challenging boss you actually enjoyed playing against. So, like, very different focus as far as YouTube Gaming. And I'm gonna jump around certainly with all the news today. Yeah, there's Godot is selling some limited edition merchandises like plushies, which an open source game or a programming engine mostly for games is kind of weird to get into the merchandise gimmick. Generally, when you see people focusing on merchandise, they're probably spending too much time thinking about merchandise and not enough time thinking about the actual programming. Perhaps American McGee being the perfect example of that, as far as failing to make a new American McGee's and Alice game, and instead using his YouTube channel to promote his wife's run merchandise, Plushy Dreadful merchandise company. A lot of these posts from YouTube advertisers are also not really being mentioned by the CEO of YouTube, Neil Mohan. One was retweeted, which, yeah, the one thing I can say so far about him is that he seems to be more behind the scenes, where the YouTube CEO previous seemed to be very much more about wanting to be the spokesman and be seen and be heard more often. Let's see if that works again. Is it a case that this guy can only stop one effect per turn? If that is the case, then I'm in trouble. Or no, I've probably won at that point. It's not the case, then I'm in trouble. This should be the last game we play for today. Also. So apparently there's been some kind of interview in that the Xbox Game Studio boss says Tango Gameworks closure was, quote, a forward-thinking decision. It was also implied that personal changes within Tango influenced the decision makers at Microsoft. Yeah. Personnel is what it says, with an EL. Yeah, I definitely think that Microsoft made perhaps a flippant decision, but it does seem like this is in line with the way Microsoft has been, and Microsoft probably still is that they only want studios if there's a big name behind it. The myth of the Steven Spielberg-like director in video games, I think runs very deep in the blood of Microsoft management. And so when Tango Gameworks lost that big name, and then it was just kind of a generic Japanese company with generic unnamed Japanese developers, they seem to have lost interest that way. I imagine there's just a lot of other problems that you have to overcome to have a Japanese company when you're a Western company like Microsoft. Just a lot of translation issues and travel issues, and it probably was just not worth it in their minds to do that. Now, I think they're wrong there. I think it makes a lot of sense for there to be more presence of Microsoft in Japan. There really should just be a Microsoft of Japan, the office that does a lot of different things and works to make Xboxes sell more. So inherently, in, let's see, a couple days, probably before Monday, this will be over. So I could keep playing, trying to reach this 200 spot or this 5 spot. And you could just keep on playing and keep on playing. But I imagine I'm not going to actually spend the energy to do that. And certainly they want me to play 8 more games to do this, and they want me to activate a massive amount of spells and traps, and then just normal summon a lot more things and duel in general, win duels. Yeah. I am questioning whether I'm even going to find time to ever duel in solo mode with my declined interest in playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Yeah, going over here and doing solo mode is just not really a priority, which is funny to say, as solo mode episodes are airing on my channel right now. I've got the hiccups. Yep. I'm not a huge fan, this is from GameDeveloper.com, of reading articles based on articles based on podcasts. But yeah, in general, I would like to perhaps hear the podcast. Although I've also said that they really need to stop letting people, whether it's Todd Howard or I believe this is Matt Booty, which would be the Xbox Game Studio boss, who's number 2, I believe, below Phil Spencer, if there isn't technically a number 2. There may be several number 2s under Phil Spencer of different divisions. But yeah, I think it's probably very wise if they start to shut down lines of communication and going on these podcasts. But yeah, particularly with the whole shutdown of Hi-Fi Rush, the developer Tango Works, there's just a lot of animosity that was created there, and it is pretty much just a standard way of doing things that you want to let a game development company languish or look like a failure before shutting them down, and they're just not doing that anymore. Whereas if you told me that Atari in its current form shut down, I don't think anybody would be upset about that, because Atari hasn't made anything new and isn't the actual original Atari anyways. Not 3 or 4 times over. It's been sold and changed hands. And when you look at like THQ Nordic, that's a company too that, while I would like to see the final Darkstalkers game made, I also wouldn't be surprised if it gets shut down after that just because of how long it's taken. But yeah, if a game company has released a game in the past year, in gamers' minds at least, it should be gold, and it should be alive and well for at least another at least 12 months after it originally releases a game. Obviously, that's not the case in the minds of Matt Booty and Microsoft. Here we have Video Games Chronicle touching the same story, saying the implication may have been due to a change of leadership. Is the team the same team that shipped something successfully previously? And that is a very good way of phrasing it, in my opinion, is that the teams really do change quite a bit. Even if just like one person leaves, the team dynamic may be ruined at that point. But yeah, also when you have just a different mentality in the team, things change, and we've seen that in a lot of other games that have been developed too, is that it might be the exact same people that were credited for the previous game, and they may just have gotten, 4 years older, 8 years older, 10 years older. I imagine the people, if there was somebody who worked on Duke Nukem Forever when it was first started, and then 25 years later was still working on it, that wouldn't be the same person, and certainly wouldn't be the same team. But yeah, Shinji Mikami is the big name that founded Tango Gameworks in 2010, but left 13 years later in 2023. And almost certainly he was the one that Microsoft liked, and maybe he was a very good salesman and sold Tango Gameworks to Microsoft as a company that they should support. Inherently, also, would it be better to keep Tango Gameworks and just make them make Call of Duty maps, which they've never done and would be really bad about? That is the question, certainly. Censored Gaming is a little bit late on some of these posts he's made. First of all, he's showing a screenshot of an old story of like how Miyazaki refused to let Disney cut any of his movies, like Nausicaa and Spirited Away, and that there would be no merchandising. And then this story kind of expands to a different story where Harvey Weinstein, now imprisoned, Harvey Weinstein was in charge of the release of Princess Mononoke, and Miyazaki sent him a samurai sword. Attached to the blade was a stark message: no cuts. Now, this story is not likely fully accurate in a couple ways, and you don't even have to read further down where he says, actually, my producer did that, although he did go to a meeting with the man and was bombarded with this aggressive attack, all the demands for cuts. He smiles, and he defeated him. So yeah, there was an argument. Weinstein is kind of known for having shouting matches and arguments and wanting to put in cuts into movies like crazy. But there's another reason why this story is not true. Even at the time that Princess Mononoke was being made, which would have been many years ago for the US release, it was, and still is to this day, illegal for true samurai swords to leave Japan. There's just no way to do it. It's considered a cultural heritage item, and they don't want their samurai swords going to museums around the world. You have to effectively steal or sneak them out of customs. So yeah, with that, you would have had to given him some cheap knockoff samurai sword, which would have been just as well. And then no cuts. It's not even the... It seems like that would be the wrong phrase to attach to the blade. Where it would have made more sense to say, if you cut my movie, I'll cut you with this. Or something like that. But, you know, this is kind of an old story. It's a silly story. It's crazy that Harvey Weinstein would have been involved in Princess Mononoke's release at all. But he was involved in quite a lot of movies. The Weinstein Company, him and his brother. Then, more video game related, since this is censored gaming, he's kind of late to the party, just making a video talking about the 3 elements that are going to be censored in Princess Maker 2, the remake of Princess Maker 2, when it comes to PlayStation version, and thus the PlayStation version has been delayed. The 3 items are: you can't use the item to increase bust size. The goal of the game overall as a child raising simulator is to have her become a princess, and so there is a thought of increasing attraction in there. And then 2 endings that are kind of bad endings. In fact, pretty much I'd say at least half of the endings could be considered bad endings, where she ends up just marrying the adoptive father. I believe you're really an adoptive father because you're only raising the kid from age 10 to like 18. So yeah, so the ending where you marry the father, where the daughter marries the father, is out, and the ending where she marries the butler, which there's this little butler character that assists you, is out. Which, yeah, I don't know why the butler character is specifically out. It seems like the Sony's censorship is really just bending over backwards to have a problem there. I mean, it goes from not even being in a real father figure role when you're a butler. Of course, in real life, it might be fairly creepy if you were raised by somebody since the age of 10, or you had a butler since the age of 10 and then you ended up marrying them. But those things happen, certainly. People want to do that, or have an impulse to do that. And certainly it's also worth pointing out, this is fiction. This isn't a flat 2D cartoon animated game. And if you can't tell slightly odd stories, then that creates a real problem. Certainly, as far as most creative expressions. He also has a video here why Shenmue's Japanese dub is hilarious, which I haven't watched, but I imagine there's just a bunch of silliness there. And then those are like the most recent ones from June 19th, and then his last one before that was like May 26th, so he's been fairly quiet. And Stellar Blade is not anything worth mentioning anymore. Speaking of censorship, while it is not video game related, it is still important to just show how much censorship seems to happen still around the world, and Australia is, with the refused classification Twitter, is a good example to see, where 2 horror books, just books, by Matt Shaw have been banned in Australia. One is called Kids from 2023, and one is called Free. And looking at this, does say warning graphic scenes of torture, although wouldn't that really be descriptions of torture? Maybe there are pictures there. And then Free. What's funny is this is a trilogy of what does that word say? Hub. I guess Hub is the, yeah, Hub trilogy is the name of it. And while I could certainly see it not being to the taste of a lot of people, it is crazy that an entire Australian government would say no citizen within Australia should be allowed to read a book. Just some craziness here. Now, the public submissions came and went as far as modernizing Australia's national classification scheme, which we haven't heard from Murphy's classification if there's been any final report on those public submissions or thought on those public submissions. This was retweeted by the CEO of YouTube as far as this, I believe it's Hollywood Insider article where Hot Ones and Good Mythical morning hosts on YouTube shows finally be able to compete for being able to compete for Emmys. It is fairly infuriating. I would assume this is the interview lady, but maybe not. It's fairly infuriating that Good Mythical Morning is as successful as it is, and that Hollywood is looking at them as being the ideal examples of content creators on YouTube, considering how much of Good Mythical Morning is just a case of the channel got really lucky really early and that they blatantly just steal ideas from other content creators. Like every single episode effectively is we took a concept from somebody a long time ago and now we are doing it and we're putting slight variations on it, but like testing out food, doing little mini games, just those kinds of things is very simplistic ideas that they stole from other people, and they just got really good about consistently making content and putting little variations on it and adding their own little bit of creative silliness to it. But also, Good Mythical Morning enjoys a hugely unfair advantage in that their success has let them create a massive infrastructure of people behind the scenes, writers, editors, thumbnail experimenters, animators, whereas no other content creator, new or even somewhat established, can afford to do all that Good Mythical Morning is doing. It's just not a even playing field by any means. So much so that Rhett and Link are approaching an age where they're going to have to start retiring, and they're pretty much just kind of already semi-retired in what they do now, and so they are expanding more and more to a whole new channel in Sport as a website and Good Mythical Kitchen as a comparison. And the similar sentiments certainly exist as far as Hot Ones. Hot Ones is taking an interesting idea. I'll give them full credit as far as just having them eat hot chicken wings, and then interviewing with 10 questions, but it's really not doing anything that amazing. Though it's just like having a team of writers to write 10 softball questions while having people eat chicken wings, whereas other content creators would have just made a hot sauce challenge video once. They're doing it over and over again. And I also have heard people make the suspicion that they're not even doing the hot sauce legitimately, and that they've watered it down in some way. And certainly this also speaks to who is Hollywood Insider, Hollywood Reporter. I guess this is HollywoodReporter.com. who they're deciding to talk to as far as YouTube content creators. Whereas if I was going to think about who should get an Emmy on YouTube, I definitely wouldn't say Good Mythical Morning and Hot Ones. I don't think they deserve Emmys, even if this was the equivalent of daytime Emmys. I would think the deeper dive content creators would deserve it. People were putting their whole heart and soul into creating something that is really a creative endeavor, whereas I'd say Hot Ones and Good Mythical Morning, not really creative there. Not really creative at all, in my opinion. Anyways, let's leave it at that. I need to hurry up. Beyond Good and Evil's remaster is going to include a new mission connecting to the second game. Ubisoft says the added content shows its enduring commitment to the franchise. One thing I would say that highlights the lack of enduring commitment to Beyond Good and Evil is that, one, it's been 25 years and they haven't made any more games. You can't even really call it a franchise at this point. And two, when they did start to seriously show and tease imagery of the animation style of what Beyond Good and Evil 2 might be, there was really no commitment at all to having this soft cell CGI cartoony color palette or model to it. They showed you a very dark and more earth tone visuals, and they showed you completely different characters and a completely different character. There's a lot of green being shown here just out of their random choices of jade here, and then there's a lot of more orangish hues here and orangish skin tones. Yeah, and there's still a question as far as just whether the Beyond Good and Evil Netflix is really going on. There's definitely a point to be talked about as far as the sequel. See, so here you have just completely different characters, completely different color palette, completely different art style. At no point would this feel like Beyond Good and Evil 2 unless somebody told you it was Beyond Good and Evil 2. You would think that this was just some totally different world. Lots of darkness. Yeah. This is a really old article that the Video Games Chronicle is linking to. But yeah. The move clearly would have been after one development hell failure, which I imagine there's been 3 or 4 of them at least with Beyond Good and Evil 2, would be to have just churned something out that looked very much like this and call it Beyond Good and Evil 2 and just say, hey, we're going to make something called Beyond Good and Evil 2. It's not the vision of the original Beyond Good and Evil 2. That's going to be Beyond Good and Evil 3. Or even if you were just going to make a spin-off game and not call it Beyond Good and Evil 2 would make sense. And I guess the question certainly to ask here, who's done it worse? Ubisoft with Beyond Good and Evil or Valve with Half-Life 3? And I would have to say now with Half-Life Alyx in VR and Black Mesa remakes that Valve has done a little bit better, and I can only say a tiny bit better than Ubisoft has. Apparently Microsoft is developing a native version of Minecraft for PS5, which I think we already knew that. Let's see. Also, July, I guess, is Disability Pride Month, which, not sure if that is a combination of LGBTQIA players who are also disabled, or if it is just people who are disabled. The color palette doesn't quite match. It's Not Without Us. And inherently, I would say disability pride is probably the wrong phrase to use. I don't think anybody really is going to be proud that they're disabled. I think most people of a right mind, of a sane mindset, would say they wish they weren't disabled. Yeah. You would probably want to call it something more like Overcoming Disability Month, or Overcoming Disabilities Pride Month, something like that. Maybe just not have pride in the name for every single month too. But yeah. There are several sponsors here for some event, and this highlights an issue certainly too with like where Microsoft needs to start cracking down on things here too, like where Bethesda is owned by Xbox, so why not just have Xbox? Maybe I would be wrong about it, but my first knee-jerk reaction would be, as I acquired a company, is to destroy its individuality in its actions. At least we'd use Bethesda as an advertisement thing, but I wouldn't really have a team that is formed in Bethesda to sponsor a disability event and have a redundant team inside of Microsoft and Xbox doing the same thing. I would say these two teams need to work together, and they will be under the Xbox title. And they're talking about tickets here. But what's the actual event? They're doing a real poor job of real poor job of explaining what the event is. Is it just called Not Without Us? I guess maybe it is. Maybe this is the only event they do. But yeah, I would think Not Without Us is a decent name. This was a UK, London-based organization, according to Twitter. But yeah, Overcoming Disability, or Living with Disability. Yep. Moving on, Sony has reportedly made cuts to the VR development with only 2 titles currently planned. That makes a lot of sense and seems like it's very believable. Inherently, I don't want VR to stop being worked on, but it really should just be worked on in laboratories in the abstract for 10 years more down the line. The controllers here are giant for either hand-finger detection or for just protective reasons, and the headsets and visuals and the electronics are giant. If we get to a point where VR is just as easy as putting on a pair of shades and that's it, that'd be great. If we got to a point where controllers are completely unnecessary, that would be great. Of course, that would be a whole different type of programming as far as making programs to work with VR. Let's see. GameDeveloper.com says that Monster Hunter Wilds' open world leap is thanks to a growing global popularity. The key creatives behind Capcom series explain why their next game has had to go even bigger. Inherently, as I'm playing Fallout New Vegas, one of the things that I find kind of pointless about it is that it's open world, when it really could have just been a much more linear experience. And I think if you mapped out where everybody walked and what everybody did in New Vegas, the paths that are most visited would be fairly similar. So yeah, there's definitely a danger in my mind that Monster Hunter Wilds would go open world and just spend a lot of energy making open worlds for no good reason. That being said, Monster Hunter is probably the one type of game where it does make a lot of sense to have open worlds, because you are just going out to forest-like areas to hunt specific monsters, and then you're going back to cities to craft and sell the components you get from the monsters. So that being open world makes a lot more sense, particularly compared to Fallout New Vegas, where playing on very easy for most of the game, I would just walk from point A to point B, and maybe there would be 2 enemies that would randomly come upon me and attack me. Let's see, Embracer has rolled out a new AI policy to massively enhance game development. Embracer feels like this may be the second or third time Embracer has mentioned AI as a way of just trying to get people hyped about Embracer Group, would be my opinion there. Miyazaki says he spends 95% of his time directing games despite being From Software's president. Really get my hands dirty. Which inherently, I think this also highlights that most presidents really are only doing 5% of the work at most compared to any other employee in a company. That is certainly the ideal that presidents and CEOs wants to sell, and I think in this case, being a Japanese president, I suspect there might be some more truth to it. The numbers are probably off. Probably is not 95%, but yeah. Certainly, if somebody has to be a CEO, a president, a boss, you would expect, your average employee would hope and expect that they were actually running the show and putting in a lot of effort and had a lot of passion and love for it. The reality of that is probably not so much. Even if somebody in the CEO level does have a passion for what they're doing is often completely disconnected from the product that the company is making. It's just looking at charts and figures and projections and working on speeches that you're going to make the shareholders, or figuring out schemes to increase shareholder value by making the product worse or charging more for it. Let's see. Apparently a Red Faction game from the Chorus developer, which that game came out and I never heard anybody say anything about it. Fish Labs was among the Embracer projects that were cancelled. Under Fish Labs' direction, the Red Faction series would have returned with a goal of evoking the cult classic Red Faction Guerrilla. Yeah. I doubt the game was really anywhere close to being even greenlit, though. Like maybe they had just barely entered pre-production. And yeah. Inherently, when we look at the state of games today, too, it's a problem where the should-haves are talked about way too much and thought about way too much, and are idealized as being these fantasy fictional games that would have been perfect in our minds, when the actual games that were created are really painting the reality of the situation, which is most games that created are released somewhat buggy, somewhat generic, somewhat repetitive, often full of DLC and microtransactions and other schemes to get money out of you. It's like we really don't have a lot of great games. At best, we're seeing games that are okay and might have an interesting twist or an interesting good feature to it, but yeah, we're not anywhere close to even making the argument that there's no such thing as a perfect game. We're getting closer and closer to the argument that there's now no such thing as a AAA good game, or really, just because so much is shoved into it, there's not enough focus on any one thing to polish it. Yep. The Godot engine has a pre-release for 4.3 beta 2, some bug fixes and things like that. It's probably not worth it for me as a general video game news reporter to talk about the betas, but it does point to the fact that the Godot engine is continuing to try and make more updates as fast as possible. The Resident Evil 2 remake has become the franchise's top seller at nearly 14 million sales, which, yeah, the scale still feels like it is really a case between 300,000 sales on even a AAA game is considered pretty good, at least remarkable, and anything above, say, 10 million is considered major success. Certainly this might explain to why they may re-release the old version of Resident Evil 1, but they still haven't really touched upon the idea of remaking Resident Evil 1 completely in the same engine that Resident Evil 2 remake was made. Is frankly, I just think too hard from it. It's also worth pointing out here, this I believe is supposed to be Leon S. Kennedy and I forget her name, but this is the Japanese version of the games in the screenshots. So when you start to look at the faces of the characters, they are distinctly of Asian appearance. And yeah, we still have that weirdness going on where remakes of old games, and in this case Capcom games, are having different skins for the main protagonists depending on what region it's being sold in. Obviously, if you buy the Western version of Resident Evil 2, you get the Western version of the skins. The good news is newer games though tend not to have that issue, and so if you're going to have Asian protagonists, they will just be Asian protagonists throughout the entire game, throughout the entire world. And a lot of that was definitely self-imposed, like assumed racism, or benevolent racism you might call it, on Capcom's thought that they would sell more if they reskinned the characters to look more like white Westerners. And I imagine the translation would just have Raccoon City be in Japanese for some reason. Although the whole story feels like it would probably fall apart once you start getting into like Resident Evil 6, where you have Leon S. Kennedy on the United States President's detail, saving the world that way. Of course, inherently Capcom's lack of smooth ability to understand racial relations is highlighted much more in Resident Evil 5, where it's set in Africa, and that still paints the big question that's hanging over the remake series is, what is Capcom going to do, if anything, with Resident Evil 5? Even if they do very little to Resident Evil 5, I think most people would be okay with that. They still have a huge problem with Resident Evil 6 after that. Moving on, we have the SteamDB charts with Banana still at a high level. There were several YouTubers that claimed at least one person involved with Banana might be a scammer, and now the company has said that they have parted ways. I will highlight the phrase "said" that they have parted ways with that person amicably. There's probably no way to really prove if that's true or not. Inherently, Banana is a clicker game though, and it has no reason to be as high as it is other than the fact that it is running a scam. And the scam here is that you really can't deny is the attention scam, where they have, by making a game that is seemingly very friendly to bots, very friendly to people leaving it idle, and one that hints at the possibility that you'll get Steam Marketplace drops that might be valuable at some point. That's the scam that can't be denied. The bigger scam people are accusing of them is that they are possibly manipulating the item drops, possibly manipulating the value of the item drops, and heavily pushing people into thinking that the item drops will be worth something, which inherently those same accusations could be made to Counter-Strike 2 and Valve themselves. Yeah. This one has a third-party EULA and doesn't use the VAC ban system, although in fairness, not too many. Not every game uses the VAC ban system. Anyways. And here we have a game called Cats, which is just cloned Banana. And here we can see how the charts are just getting now flooded with garbage clones of the same game. And then we'll find Egg, which is slightly newer than Banana. Yeah, this is very quickly going to become a crisis as far as just the top most played games being used to just fill the list with garbage things. It's kind of crazy to have OBS Studio, particularly the Steam version of OBS Studio, in the top 100. The International Game Developers Association posted something here that I feel like was a little bit weird, in that they're talking about World Refugee Day and the International Rescue Committee, which, yeah, I don't see how that really connects to video games, but I can also see a thought there that nobody's going to really complain about refugees in general. People are only going to complain about refugees specific and near them that directly affect them. But yeah, if I was running the International Game Development Association, which is supposed to be an association, I would assume that it represents many game developers, I would not take any stances on anything other than things directly video game related, and I would just focus on that in particular. Yeah, scholarship programs and feel-good things are good moves too. Noticeably, that World Refugee Day also was unmentioned by anybody else I follow on Twitter, so it is definitely not something that people are paying a lot of attention to over in the United States. Here we can see the chart skyrocketing for Elden Ring. I believe that's because of a new DLC on Elden Ring, bringing a lot of people back. And on this Friday, it seems like we're seeing some of the better contenders working their way up, with the exception of Destiny 2, which is continuing to trend downward, and Helldivers 2, Baldur's Gate 3. There was a whole Helldivers 2 survey or something where It was either accept a in-game item or donate to a real-world charity, and they chose to donate to the real-world charity because they hated the in-game item so much. Yeah, banana here is skyrocketed to the top of the list, and they'll just stay there. It's going to be really weird when the end of the year talk here is going to be around games like Palworld just shooting up and then crashing down, and games like Helldivers shooting up and crashing down. And then scam games like, or at least allegedly scam games like Banana. I guess I should say allegedly. Here you can see Elden Ring has been up and down and then skyrocketed up. And inherently, maybe at the end of the year, the whole conversation really should just be ignore the first 6 months of a year because none of it matters. It's just not going to be the same games being talked about. Still don't have anything new on Steam other than a Team 17 sale, which I only think of Team 17 as the Worms company, but clearly they have several other things. Is this game Tevi? I'm gonna open that and check that out. Dragon Age franchise sale. It's been a while since I've seen this game. I guess people are still playing it. I did see that Back 4 Blood put a bunch of changes and updates that they either were working on or were going to have just recently released. And yeah, specifically on Steam, any of the hype around the Nintendo Direct just wouldn't really connect because there's just none of those Nintendo games, or very little of those video games. There's a game called Kaon that I think looks somewhat like this. Kanon, though, might be a name confusion game. Elden Ring beating the Steam Deck. Kingdom Hearts still doing particularly well. Overwatch 2 actually doing fairly well. And as far as popular upcoming games, there isn't a single game here that looks like a big AAA games. Most of these popular upcoming games look like they are adult games. Visual novels, things like that. And then I guess I question the value here as far as the specials. So while we're here, let's just click on this and see if that will load. Yeah, it took 2 clicks to see what are they selling. Blasphemous 1, Blasphemous 2, Thymacia. I didn't think any of those were actually from Team 17, though. Escapist, Worms, Trepang 2. Let's check that one out. Ship of Fools. Definitely feels like there's some games here that I've missed. Whole Hell Let Loose game. Dredge. That was one of the ones I wanted to play. And I guess that's pretty much all they have. Conscript is one they were talking about. Still really trying to figure out what the next game I should play even is. Yeah, I think I own all the Worms games at this point. Some of these games are weirder games that could have overlooked or missed them. Here we have some Steam Deck verified. It's lower down the scroll part here, but yeah, Steam Deck is still getting pushed. Yep. And I guess I really haven't done anything with my Steam Deck in the past couple days, so yeah, I might get back to it, but I'm not sure what I'm waiting for, working on. Oh, I did have a thought here. Because when you click the follow list, it actually just activates a JavaScript that changes this button that says follow to be hidden and unhides a button that shows a picture of a check mark and following. And also I assume it does some JavaScript post to the server to actually update whether it's on the follow list or not. I can, through some considerable effort, inject some JavaScript in the same way I'm injecting JavaScript to change the speed of how fast this slideshow goes. I could just add some more code there, and what I could do, if Firefox will allow me, which is a bit of an if, is have the tabs. What was I going to do? Have it move me to the next tab after I put something on the follow list, which doesn't always work here. That's an important part to mention, but yeah. Let's close this one. So the general thought would be, when I decide to put something on the follow list, that would be my final thought on this. Yeah, do I ever really want to play a real world World War II military game? No, I just don't think so. I barely have enough attention span to play something like Wolfenstein, as far as a fictionalized version of that. But then what that would let me do is use my middle mouse plugin to close tabs, and then when I click follow, it would not close the tab, it would just move to the next one on the right. There is also a level, certainly, of relevancy I have to consider around games like this, where it has only 150 reviews, but it's been out for 2 years. That something like Batoria Lost Haven only would make sense if I just loved to play these kinds of games and had a whole bunch of time to play these kinds of games. Whereas some of these others definitely. Let's see, I probably would also have to inject some JavaScript for when things are put on the wish list too. And inherently these are things I'd spend a lot of time doing to save a little bit of time in every interaction, because it is very much a case of scale at this point. Like, everything needs to work at scale. See, I don't know why this is not working at all, because I am looking at hundreds of Steam games, potentially at least 100 Steam games. It feels like every live stream. So yeah, we're kind of all over the place as far as headlines go. Xbox has started refunding players who bought the canceled Redfall DLC. PlayStation is skipping Gamescom again this year. Feels like this has been like 5 years in a row that they've skipped it, so it seems weird that they're even saying that they're skipping it. Xbox is going to Gamescom. Beyond Good and Evil 2 was delisted ahead of the 20th anniversary reveal this week, which I believe the reveal has happened, although weirdly we have not gotten to those headlines yet. Let's see. I'm not sure my clips are working today either, just because of the way things are going. Lowering Elden Ring's difficulty would break the game, it says itself, according to Miyazaki. Lowering the difficulty wasn't the right approach to making Elden Ring more accessible. In fairness, I don't think I am being held back from playing Elden Ring because I think the game is too difficult. I haven't seen a lot of people saying that. It is a Dark Souls game, so it probably is fairly difficult. What's preventing me from playing it is that it just seems like a lot of people talk about how good the game is without actually saying anything about the game. So I still am very much uncertain as to what the story is and what's going on and what makes it the best Dark Souls, Demon Souls-like game so far. Also, that style of game is just something that I've never really wanted to play. A Gex trilogy has gotten a new trailer. Pre-orders for the collection start in fall of 2024. A 90s beat-em-up, Fighting Force 1 and 2 are getting a re-release. No pictures from Video Games Chronicle. The premium clothing brand The King of Games is launching a pop-up shop in Tokyo. King of Games. It's an interesting title. That's what Yu-Gi-Oh! Calls himself. Yeah. The thing here in particular, though, is that you would think all these sprites would have to have been officially licensed from Nintendo, and that this wasn't just a fly-by-night clothing brand. They're Kyoto based, and I believe Nintendo is also in Kyoto. Kyoto was the old capital of Japan before they moved it to Tokyo. Effectively, I think they built Tokyo from scratch. And that, frankly, they should build a new Tokyo, a Neo Tokyo. Probably not call it that just because of anime reasons. Akira, in particular, the city that gets blown up and is the main city, and Akira is called Neo Tokyo. But yeah, they should probably build a new central government hub location. The United States should do the same thing. They should build a new Washington, D.C. in a new location. It would help the economy and just give a lot of improvement to the infrastructure. Beyond Good and Evil 20th Anniversary Edition will be released next week. Weirdly, it does seem like they are just not showing any screenshots. Even though there was this whole showcase, and that they tweeted it early, which also shows that Ubisoft is not doing a good job of controlling their own Twitter and their announcements. Nintendo has taken down a fan-made Rhythm Heaven remix tool. Heaven Studio was using copyrighted sprites and sound effects. Yeah. Which, yeah. That's not the way to do that, but there really is no way. Don't do anything that touches anything Nintendo thinks they own inherently. Yeah. Topspin 2K25 Season 2 adds Wimbledon content, a new pro, and a Gucci themed court. Again, no screenshots. Yeah, I wonder if there would be any way that you could have like a pirate political movement like they do in Germany or I think it's in Germany, that there's a piracy political movement, less copyright positive lobbying that would actually work to particularly target massive defenders of copyright over defenders of copyright, in my opinion, like Nintendo, and change the copyright laws so that they are more reasonable as far as what people in society have just come to expect. But yeah, I don't see how that really would happen. If anything, it would be something that would have to be funded by somebody like Elon Musk, and then that would come with its own problems. Let's see. Here's that headline saying Xbox is coming to Gamescom this year, promising to have the biggest booth ever. Of course, that I'm going to be talking about games they've pretty much already talked about right now, and they may have something new, but I wouldn't imagine it's more than 2 or 3 new announcements, and probably more European, German-centric announcements. I did see on Twitter somebody make a list of like German-made gaming companies, and that definitely feels a little weird as a United States citizen to see that kind of patriotism in this case Germany, but it's the exact same kind of patriotism that every country tends to want to have, and it makes some sense certainly to promote people within your own country that you might actually work with, instead of just generally promoting United States Western video games. Let's see, the PlayStation Portal's latest update is now available, and Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree launch trailer arrives ahead of today's release, which that certainly explains why so many people are playing Elden Ring right now. The Crash Insane trilogy sales have jumped to 20 million copies. I guess we're just doing headlines right now, and then we'll do the games on Steam after and see if that affects any watch time. Again, this is just because my macro is all out of order, or at least somewhat out of order. Focus Entertainment and Chance of Sinnar developer Rundisk have renewed their partnership. The two will team on Rundisk's next project, which is billed as another original property. Okay. I don't recognize this game, Chance of Sinnar, though. That feels like one I just missed. There's a report that Apple focusing on making cheap Vision Pro over high-end iterations. Certainly if Apple could make a cheap VR headset, they probably would put a lot of energy and focus on making it lighter weight and smaller and just less expensive, to the point where it starts to make some sense. I still feel like the whole light blocking elements suck when you have these big foam eye protectors that you need to have around your eyes, and that would be my main complaint about this appearance. Certain. Yeah, I don't know what you could really do about that though. As far as the only thing you can do is just have really bright screens, LCDs, lasers, projecting images directly into your eyes to account for the light level in the room, and that's probably not very good for your eyes. Venture to the Vial Maker studio, Cut to Bits, has laid off the majority of its staff. Cut to Bits venture into the Vial was released this past May, and the studio is already cutting most of its small staff. This isn't yet another game that I just don't remember seeing. In a lot of ways, it feels like American McGee's Alice. Yeah. And this highlights a real problem. even with me going over the Steam releases with a fine-tooth comb, I am still having problems remembering games, and game publishers are having problems getting games put in front of people's eyes, even when there's just no competition at all. If this was released the past May, does that mean last month, or does that mean even a year and a month ago? It probably means no, last month. That's ridiculous. Now, inherently, also a big part about this is just the way games are funded, and the publishing model is broken and has been broken for a long time, and it's finally just completely collapsing. If game development was done like most other projects, or like how most people would do other projects, you wouldn't have publishers and investors and all of that. You would save up your money and pay for it as you develop it out of pocket, or you would do enough funding to have a budget and get a loan and have it be developed that way. Whereas publishers are worse effectively now, it seems, than banks are, in that publishers, yes, will loan money to developers to develop games, but the money fluctuates. What you have to do to be made whole from paying off that loan fluctuates. And unlike banks, publishers will often not give you a second loan even if you've paid off the loan or are on the way to paying off the first loan, just because you're not paying off the loan fast enough. In this case, that would be the equivalent of a game selling well but not selling well enough that the publisher would want to do it. And inherently, the publishers are probably getting all of their money from a regular bank and a loan, so publishers are not offering a better offering there, at least on the financials. Maybe the argument is the publishers know what they do when advertising games, but can you really believe that to be the case when a game like Venture to the Vile is totally foreign to me a month after it was released? Yeah, that is a real question to certainly contemplate. And I assume there is a publisher here. It may just be a case that they self-published, which that too is not working. And this is where Valve and Steam really need to earn their 30% commission on all sales, is that they need to improve their algorithm drastically to put more games in front of people who actually would like to play those games. Let's see. BAFTA has opened submissions and tweaks the criteria for the 2025 Game Awards. Voting changes and eligibility tweaks will impact some categories. There's a whole article here on GameDeveloper.com if you want to check it out, but I think it would probably be wiser to just assume that it's not important information, and we'll get these submissions of nominees in just a matter of weeks, maybe a month or two. We're not at the end of the show yet. Meta is laying off workers within Reality Labs division. Amazon Luna adds games from Good Old Games and launches in 3 more countries. Alright. So the question here is, where are we? I have a lot of Gematsu articles. I want to go through all the games on Steam here, and then we'll do the Gematsu articles at the end and kind of just break it up that way. I probably should always do that, because Gematsu articles in particular often just repeat what GameDeveloper.com and Video Games Chronicles covers, although inherently it might be better to do Gematsu first and then Video Games Chronicles and GameDeveloper.com last. But yeah, all the new games on Steam. Stealth Camping Simulator. This is June 19th. What happened is I don't think I trusted my macro to actually open all of the tabs that of new potential games. Scars on Mars. Yeah. We have an extra problem here. None of this wants to work. And I didn't do anything. Yeah, let me just think about that for a second. Sauna of the Dead. That's a funny Survivors parody. But yeah, I don't think I'd actually promote it. Yeah. There is, I guess, maybe an argument to be made where perhaps there needs to be an outlet for joke games and meme games. That maybe if the games were free, maybe if the games were better labeled, you could have some of these joke meme game makers. I don't even know why I'm trying to put these on the follow list. It's not working on any of them. My fear is I'm gonna have to come back and put everything on the follow list a second time. Yeah. I have no idea what's going on with that in particular. This really should just be working. Guess perhaps what I could do as an experiment, we should just try to debug this. You see, this is kind of an example of a game I wouldn't really want to put on a follow list, but I would make a YouTube short around it, which breaks the idea of what I was going to do originally, which would have forced me to put everything on the follow list. It's also worth mentioning I still haven't done any follow list cleanup in a long time. Okay, so what I was thinking is I'll just turn off uBlock Origin as a plugin. I'm not signed in. Okay. So let's see what we can do here to address that and see how quickly that fixes it. Well, apparently that fixed it really nicely. Don't know why I wasn't signed in. All of a sudden it works. So I have to retract that I didn't do anything. I did do something. I did something years ago, which was make uBlock Origin visually change how Steam looks, getting rid of the top banner bar, which would have shown me immediately with whether I was signed in or not. Inherently, that does mean I was signed in at the beginning of the stream and something weird happened that got me signed out. I will say Steam is not bad in that aspect as far as signing you out of their website all the time. There definitely are some websites that are really bad on that aspect. And then there are some websites that are straight up awful and can't be signed in at all. The Steam client is still bad in a different way, in that it prevents the Steam Deck from going to sleep. And honestly, I kind of question if there just is not a deep hibernate function built into the Steam Deck. Like, maybe I am confused here, but it should, in my mind, like any other computer, be able to write the contents of RAM into a hibernation file onto the storage, the NVMe, and then completely shut down the computer, and the Steam Deck in this case, and then completely load up. And then it should, under that style of hibernation, take a minute or two to awaken when it's gone into that deep sleep. I mean, that hibernation. Or actually, there's another state that is deep sleep. But yeah, I'm not really seeing it do that. I'm seeing it go into a deep sleep and a sleep mode. But the deep sleep and sleep mode still uses the battery. So if you put a Steam Deck into sleep mode and you come back a couple days later, then you find it is completely dead. Which I guess, in fairness, cell phones are also like that. Although you tend not to ever let your phone be unused that long. Yeah. Phones too don't really go into a true hibernate mode. You would just turn off your phone at that point. But Android phones in particular, what I'm talking about, here's yet another clicker game. Here's a egg name confusion clicker game. This looks like NES football. I have some nostalgia for playing that, although if I really tried to play it nowadays, I probably would have no interest in actually spending any time with it. NES football, much like Punch-Out, is more of a pattern recognition game than an actual football simulator, which inherently, the limitations of the NES games created more interesting experiences than what a modern game can do, where it can just directly present itself. Yeah. Oh yeah. Another thing worth mentioning is that my macro broke in some way. I'm not sure why, and so there is a small chance of YouTube Shorts being mislabeled, and so instead of it saying Hexo City here, it might say something completely different, a different game's name. And honestly, I'm going to be more flippant about YouTube Shorts in general. Like, I barely look at them before they're scheduled anyways, but if one mislabeled one gets out, whatever. It is a sad statement, but regardless of the fact that YouTube Shorts are being very well promoted by the YouTube algorithm and being seen by a lot of people, they are in no way really promoting you to spend any, or they're convincing me, at least personally, to spend any extra energy on it. Some of these are already on the fall list, and I'm just willing to make another YouTube short. This is one of those weirder, slightly different animated games that's hard to evaluate. Yeah. Yeah, I still don't have a clue as far as what else what I do with a YouTube short. I'm surprised I even was lucky enough to think, ooh, a brand new Nancy Drew game. No advertisement around it at all. It looks brand new, at least. Could have been like this as an iPad game or something that's just been ported to PC. Hmm. 20 plus hours of gameplay. I was gonna play all the Nancy Drew games, and I got a couple of them, and then lost momentum covering the first few of them. That are actually the different style of games and not really that good. Yeah, it's definitely getting, as I get another day older every day, it gets more and more obvious that I need somebody else to play half the games to expand out into something like what Giant Bomb and other mainstream video game journalism sites were back in their heyday, which is multiple people playing multiple games. And then potentially would see even that just isn't really what I want. What I really would want is a way to freeze time. To just say nothing is going to happen. Is this some kind of Pokemon clone type game? It looks like it. Old school Pokemon clone. Is this in English? It says it is. It's rated very positively. I'll give it a chance. But yeah. Of course, if I could freeze time, then there would be all kinds of implications there. More than just playing video games. That would be very low ambition to just play video games instead of, say, walking into a bank and emptying out the vaults, or walking into a bank, I suppose, and emptying out the cash registers is probably a smarter move to do. Then even that is probably pretty low ambition. I mean, I could do so much more with such an ability. You could, for instance, remove all the nuclear codes in every country. If you could just walk in there with infinite time and no one to stop you, you could, yeah, denuclearize the entire planet. That would be good. You could perhaps sabotage some of the worst polluters around. You could move food and resources around without it rotting. Certainly. Yeah, you could de-escalate individual criminal activity if you can find it. And honestly, if you froze time once, spent assuming you don't age and that you don't just like run out of energy doing this if you could freeze time. That it's not sucking the life out of you to pause for even a few seconds, which it probably would if you just had such a magical ability. Although probably is a weird word to use in a fantasy. I never thought I would say yes to a helicopter sim, but I'm gonna give that a chance. But yeah, if you just set the world to be noticeably different, noticeably better once, it would just be considered just like this weird miraculous event that would set things into motion. Yeah. And yeah, all of a sudden people would be so obsessed about that event that their entire way of thinking, their entire way of acting would be shifted somewhat. I almost want to say yes to this, but it's too much on the screen. Yeah. You could definitely just like start local. Go into every single house and just clean every house if you were going to do that. Of course, I definitely would want some work, and that wouldn't be particularly as fun as playing video games. But yeah, just have fresh food in every refrigerator, every house cleaned out of actual trash. Just have clothing in every closet, books on it in every shelf. Take every single thing out of a grocery store and just distribute it more fairly and equally, not based on whether people can afford or choose to purchase such foods, because choice in a lot of cases is just whatever you've been advertised to or what are you aware of. We have yet another clicker game, but at least in this one it looks like there's an actual game here. Yeah. Planting gardens even would make a lot of sense. Just like every backyard all of a sudden becomes seeded with fruits and vegetables instead of just grass. All of a sudden food stops being as big of an issue. And there definitely would be an argument there. Do you accomplish this haphazard attempt at creating a whole new world order by taking control and just being a leader, or do you do it with your own hands? And I guess with the ability to freeze time, you probably do a little bit of both. Yep. Put yourself in the power of authority, so it looks like you're accomplishing things normally, and then cheating by pausing time too. Anyways, enough of that fantasy. Let's go back to the headlines here. Amazon Luna adds games from Good Old Games and launches in 3 more countries. I did see some Good Old Games were available. Oh yeah, and speaking of things on sale, but is that really everything? No, we still got the Komatsu stuff to talk about. I had talked about in a previous stream how my washing machine was broken, and I ended up getting one that was scratch and dent, very simplistic, for about $360. Well, now Best Buy seems to be trying to clearance out Insignia brand washers as far as laundry washers and dishwashers, and so they have one that is a high efficiency washer, which the one I got isn't, and has way more functions for like $276, and it's brand new, not scratch and dent. And then the dishwasher, which is a 3-rack with the third top rack just being for like silverware washer, for like $250. Now it might be a case that you pay something for delivery from Best Buy, but I did see these on Slick Deals, so I figured I'd mention them. It also might be a case that Insignia and those models in particular aren't particularly good. Who knows? That is always a danger. I would say both washing machines, if they are front load, the one that's on sale is a top load, and dishwashers, if you can get one that will pop the door open so that it can dry out better, try to get that. That is a recommendation as far as a feature that's probably actually worth it, in my opinion. Anyways, let's go through these Gematsu articles and then we'll be done for today. Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance sales have topped 500,000 in 3 days. So despite the fact that a lot of people are upset that the original Shin Megami Tensei 5 seems to really have just been a beta for this final version, Vengeance, people, particularly I imagine a lot of Japanese people, have bought this new version immediately. And yeah, overall this has pushed them from 1.1 million to 1.6 million, roughly. Nope. Yep. No, that's exactly right. Rough. So, if these numbers stay anywhere close, then the number of sales for the original game will be surpassed in about 9 days. Which, yeah, that's a lot of numbers. It's a lot of sales. Although I could see it actually not maintaining that momentum too, because the vast majority of the fan base who want to play the Shin Megami Tensei games are very much hardcore fans. And I guess I'll just leave it at that. Game Freak and Wonder Planet announced a free-to-play sailing adventure RPG called Pandland for iOS and Android, which looks to me like it is half Wind Waker, half Minecraft. Let's see if we can look at the trailer and get a little bit of a better understanding on it. This again would be an attempt by Game Freak to break away from their connection to making the Pokemon games for the Pokemon Company, which they've tried that once before. I would argue, I suspect that the blocky gimmick that Minecraft succeeded on is never going to work again. That was a once in a million visual aspect. It definitely is not the aspects of modern day Minecraft to copy from. Yeah, looking at this, not seeing anything too amazing here. Looks like there's a lot of ocean, looks like there's a lot of locations, and the locations maybe lead to actual dungeons, but maybe not. Yeah, this is moving too slow for my taste. Now here's a great example of let's make some anime characters and then make them into blockheads. That seems very pointless. Yeah, so that has failed to maintain my attention. I imagine there's a chance that it will fail to maintain other people's attention also. For Magia, extended trailer and an anime project is in production. For Magia, I imagine is how it's pronounced, not Mage. Looks like you're a standard Japanese RPG. Battle Spirits Crossover has been announced for PS5, Switch, and PC. Crossover seems to be the subtitle of the game and not an indication of some kind of crossover. It is some kind of card game. But it's not one I'm familiar with. Deliver Us the Moon for Switch launches July 16th. The Famitsu sales from the 10th to the 16th have been updated. Let's see, that puts Shin Megami Tensei for the Switch in the #1 spot, where the PS5 is in the #2 spot. What's the difference here? Massive number of sales difference there. Really, you're talking 13,000 more units sold on the Switch in 1 week compared to the PS5. Monster Hunter Stories for the Switch. PS4 version might make up some of that Switch sales, but not enough with its 6,000 sales. Snufflekin launching in the #10 spot, and it's frankly a good week for PlayStation in that they even got 2 PlayStation games in the top 10. The next PlayStation game is Stellar Blade in the 19th spot, still selling fairly well as far as units go. Just 2,000 units overall. It's only sold 100,000 units. And so my argument that 300 units sold alone is a good number may be too high of a number, really, but certainly some of these games have sold way more. A lot of these Nintendo games in particular have sold way more than 300,000 units, but Stellar Blade felt like a big game, and it hasn't sold just 104,000 units in its lifetime in Japan. Although specifically this is Japan, so 100,000 in Japan may be just a drop in the bucket compared to where it sold elsewhere. So I'm not really comparing apples to apples now that I think about it. And Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is way down in the 29th spot. Hardware sales, I imagine, are still very good for the Switch. Kind of bad for the Xbox this week. Particularly still really bad for the PlayStation 4. A transformative third-person shooter other skin has been announced for PC, which seems like there's some kind of almost animalistic appearance to the skin here. Which, yeah. Now, one of the myriad of ways in which people would describe themselves or pretend like people were describing themselves was other kin without the S, where somebody feels like they are not a human and that there's some other kind of thing. Dragonkin, I think, was another one where you feel like you're a dragon. Things like that. I'm not sure anybody really used those terms in large enough numbers for it to matter. And that is kind of what this looks like. So at a certain level, it does kind of feel like it's an RPG where you are playing as what I think people generally would just describe as a furry, or somebody who maybe furry is is almost certainly the wrong phrase, but I think that's what people would describe it as somebody who feels like they're not human, that they have the mentality or soul of some kind of anthropomorphic animal, or animal in general. Yeah. Even this thumbnail doesn't really feel like it matches the game too much, but I'll make a YouTube short around it. Super Monkey Ball Banana Rumble DLC Sega Pass adds Beat from Jet Set Radio. Which, yeah, they are going to just announce every single Sega mascot-like character for Super Monkey Ball Banana Rumble. Which is part of, I think, Sega's new plan here to bring back nostalgia for their old games and focus on making new versions or sequels to their old games instead of exclusively focusing in on either casinos and pachinko arcade. Well, they were focusing on arcades in Japan, and all those got shut down. And then they were focusing somewhat, I think, on pachinko games in Japan, and I don't think those are selling particularly well. And then for a brief moment there, they were trying to have Sega mascots in weirder, newer games, and that didn't work. And definitely, overall, they've always focused on making a whole bunch of Sonic games, and almost all of the recent Sonic games that are good aren't actually made by Sega, when the ones that are made by Sega are poorly received. But yeah, seems like Sega has a new direction, and I guess we need to just applaud that they have any direction at all, because even that seems like a step in the right direction. Let's see. Elrin Taros Wanderings is coming to the West on August 16th for Switch and PC. This is yet another fantasy game I've never heard of. Of course, why would I have heard of it? Yeah. And I don't think there's really too much to say otherwise there. It's definitely the kind of game I could put on the follow list, but it's going to come down to whether people review it well or not to even catch my attention to begin with. A game called Nivalis has been delayed to the spring of 2025. It's a cyberpunk slice of life simulation game. Although at a certain point, how can you have a slice of life simulation game in a cyberpunk environment and not just call that a adventure game? At a certain level, it feels like a slice of life would be contrastingly boring. Yeah. And this one's been delayed, so I'm not going to make another YouTube short around it. Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2 gameplay overview trailer is available to check out at Gamatsu.com. Pepper Grinder is coming to the PS4 and 5 and the Xbox One and Series on August 16th. It's currently already available for the Switch and PC and Steam. Pepper Grinder. Inherently, this really sucks when I'm not doing follow list cleanup. That makes it so that the only time I see a game that's on the follow list that deserves to be put on the wish list is when it ports over to a different platform, and there's another Gamatsu announcement because of that. The Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy has topped 20 million. Sales have topped 20 million. Dune Awakening trailers and screenshots. Why make it an MMO? Narrative and spirituality, alternate history, and character creation are all different trailers apparently. Yeah, I don't know if there's enough of a fandom to make an MMO for Dune. Frankly, I don't know if there's enough of a fandom for anything to make MMOs. I definitely look at MMOs and think, well, World of Warcraft was the one successful MMO, and then there's a few others that are slightly less successful, or moderately less successful than World of Warcraft. And then there's a whole bunch of also-rans that were not successful at all. Like Elder Scrolls Online would be one of the moderately successful ones. EverQuest, in its current state, might be somewhat. Destiny, I guess. I don't know if we really want to call Destiny 2 an MMO at that point, or is that just a game as a service at that point? may have a narrow definition of what an MMO is in my mind, but I just don't think MMOs ever as a concept really were gonna stick around forever. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Splintered Fate for the Switch launches July 17th. It's currently available for Apple Arcade. I definitely want all the Ninja Turtle games to eventually come to Steam. This is also perhaps an example of an Apple Arcade game abandoning Apple Arcade once again, because it doesn't seem like there's enough support there or player base there. Over Horizon X Steel Empire launches July 18th. This is for PS4 and Switch. Looks like it is 3 old shoot 'em up games, if I was to guess. A first-person character-driven adventure game called The Berlin Apartment has been announced for the PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. Seems like there's potentially multiple iterations of this apartment. In different ways it's been decorated. And that's supposed to tell you some kind of story. That might be interesting as far as the narrative through line being the apartment. Of course, being set in Berlin and going over the course of a century, you expect that at some point it's going to run into some Nazi elements. Fighting Force Collection has been announced for the PS4 and 5 and the Switch and PC. Once again, I think this is fairly old games getting re-released by limited run games this time. Gimmick 2 has been announced for all consoles and PC. When did Gimmick 1 come out? Let's see if we can... When did all these announcements happen too? Were these direct announcements or were these... Yeah, there's just nothing here except for this one picture. Or was there some kind of event? Snow Brothers Wonderland has a gameplay trailer. It's due out in 2024. Snow Brothers was a game I remember playing on the NES. Weirdly, it's coming now for the PS5, 4, and Switch. Let's see. Has it changed in any way from what I expect? I guess it has. And that it is now a 3D platforming game with some kind of map element in the side. Yep, and there's boss fights and things like that. Snow Brothers definitely coming from the Mario Brothers mentality of naming your protagonists. Yep, this looks like a whole game trying to optimize on the idea of a snowman that can make large snowballs and then roll the snowballs to attack enemies. Now, in the original Snow Brothers 2D game, you would make snowballs at the top of several platforms and then it would roll down and hit several enemies. In this 3D environment, I don't think you can really do that. Yeah. We definitely have hit a weird situation now where old games that really never needed a sequel are getting sequels just because why not? Because there's no real competition, because people are out of ideas. Take your pick for the reason. And I have no idea who these other characters and monsters and creatures are from. I probably rented Snow Brothers for like one weekend and played it for just a few hours, so if there was some big princess and evil Black Knight character, I never got that far in the NES game to find that out. Beyond Good and Evil 20th Anniversary Edition launches June 25th, so 4 days for all consoles and PC. So we finally have found an article that is actually officially announcing it. And this is once again not loading. Yeah, they were talking about how YouTube may just straight up start trying to experiment with baking in ads um, into the streams so that you couldn't detect as easily whether an ad was playing or not, and you couldn't ad block as much. I don't know if that really would work with today's modern technology. It might work fairly easily on cell phones, but a computer may still be able to figure it out. Whereas what looks like is happening here is that it is trying to buffer, and then it is just dropping the entire buffer. Alright, well, I really want to see this. So let's try and reload this page. Try that again. It looks like that may actually be working. The gray bar at the bottom looks like it's actually buffering. Although weirdly, it's not playing. Yeah, maybe my internet's having problems. No, not really. I don't think the streaming is soaking up all the bandwidth or anything. If anything, I would suspect it's probably just Firefox updated and something is getting... it's not working now. Well, whatever. I'm not gonna sit here and waste all my time on that. Let's just look at the official website and see if that loads instead. Main point I want to make here is that this is something that looks very different, more cartoony, more kid-friendly. Now, weirdly, I don't know if Beyond Good and Evil really was ever that kid-friendly of a game. It's just kind of a little too difficult, a little too grindy of an experience. There's nothing, I think, too offensive in it, where you couldn't have a 13-year-old play it. But it just didn't seem like it really was targeting that. These visuals look pretty good. Certainly. There is a danger here, certainly, for when you have kind of a rabid fan base, is that they start to get more obsessed with the behind-the-scenes developers content, the director's commentary type stuff, instead of your series or your content really expanding. And that sometimes comes off weird. For instance, the Amazon Prime animated show Hazbin Hotel is kind of a great example of that, where a YouTuber tried to create that for years and created a huge rabid cult fan base, and there's just way more in the community and the backstory around Hazbin Hotel than there seems to actually be in the Amazon Prime animated series that is more of the final product. Also, the community may be just ahead of what season 1 is, so that becomes an issue too. So, updated achievements, new speedrun mode, and just an upgraded experience, remapped controls, improved graphics, updated audio. Otherwise, it does seem like it is still going to be about the same game. So inherently, like when you see this big open area, it's, if I recall correctly, not really that big, and it's not going to be any bigger. Here you have a heck of a lot of concept art. And see, they say this was a pioneering action-adventure game, and maybe that's true, but it certainly failed to stay a pioneering action-adventure game. The main thing you would want here, more than anything, is for there to be new features. Are just going to take you this way. You'd want the game to run 100% smoothly and be a much better experience playing it than playing the original game, which I don't think the original game was particularly that clunky, but it probably was. The second thing I'm recognizing, since this is a Ubisoft game, is that we would want to be able to buy this game smoothly without having to download Ubisoft Connect and get it through a Ubisoft experience. Of course, there's really no reason to pre-order something like this. Like, best case scenario you would have here is you get the game, play it at your own pace, and maybe by the time you're done with it, you might have just the announcement of an actual release date of Beyond Good and Evil 2. Unless they're rushing this out, unless they put Beyond Good and Evil out in November. But even then, you probably have plenty of time to get this at a reasonable pace and play it. Wait a couple weeks until reviews come out. Remastered in 4K and 60 frames per second, it says. I question, certainly, if we aren't going to start seeing games that have been quote-unquote remastered in 4K using just some cheap, low-effort upscaling process. Which, yeah, you certainly could do that. Just cheat your way through it and not put any real creative input or effort into it. Fear Effect for the PS4 and 5, Switch and PC is coming in 2025. We're seeing a level of older games getting re-released too. So this may be the final outcome from the long-running situation of there not being any games. So this thing's not even going to play until the buffer is full, and even then it's not going to play. Weird. Fear Effect was originally released on February 24 in 2000. Yeah. And certainly my memory of years is way off too, because this is something I would have said this is probably a PlayStation 1 game that came out in 1990, and so I'd be like a decade off. But yeah, it's been a rough decade, I guess, between 2000 and 2022, 2024. It's been a rough couple of decades for gaming. Yep, I guess I'll just leave it at that. Tomba 2 is coming to the PS4 and 5, Switch and PC in 2025. Let's see. When was the original Tomba? Tomba 2 The Evil Swine Return first launched October 28th, 1999 in Japan. So this is yet another limited run. So there was a limited run event, obviously, where they announced the re-release of several old games, which I do have to apply to limited run for filling in a niche there, in that they are re-releasing old games you may not really remember that well, or you may have never seen. There should be one company in the game industry that does something like that, maybe even 2 or 3. Obviously, though, that can't be the entire gaming community just re-releasing old games. There aren't that many old games that people really want to play or really want to see. Bubsy in the Perfect Collection has been announced for PS5, Xbox Series, Switch, and PC. Feels like it hasn't been that long since the last Bubsy game was released. So I wonder if this is older Bubsy games or just a collection of older and newer Bubsy games. And Bubsy as a mascot is not anybody I really recognize. If you told me Bubsy was actually made up and he wasn't actually ever a mascot, I'd half believe you. I do think I saw him every now and then, but he definitely wasn't an amazing mascot. It's a playable history that includes games, artifacts, and interviews. All the games have been carefully updated for modern PCs and consoles. So this is more of a history lesson as much as it is a game. But yeah, certainly a lot of old games probably are better situated as history lessons. There definitely have been some old games I've tried to play, and all it really has wrapped up as is just being something that's interesting to talk about but not actually interesting to play. Some of the Disney collection is an example, I think, of that, where the old Disney games are interesting to highlight and show but really too difficult to actually play. So the Limited Runs Games announced over 20 new physical releases at the Limited Runs Games 3 with Beyond Good and Evil 20th Anniversary Edition, Lollipop Chainsaw, Repop, and more. Noticeably here, I missed something here. Why did my macro not open up those news stories? A lot of these are older games I recognize. They definitely have some older things. Now Wolfenstein 2 New Colossus is about the weirdest one. Specific games here have been developed using a proprietary Carbon engine, which, okay, some kind of emulator engine effectively. And then some more digital releases. So yeah, these are just like tweets. That's all they have here. So they didn't, yeah, Gamester hasn't written a full article on a lot of these, and instead they just retweeted screenshots. And that seems to be about all they had to show. Some of these don't even have videos. Yeah. A Jay and Silent Bob game. Lollipop Repop. So we'll just have to assume there will be more news later. Penny's Big Breakaway. I was wondering if this might be based off of Penny from... No, I don't think this is based off of that. Penny and Yo-Yo. Yeah. There was a claymation animation of a character named Penny in the... What is that guy's name? Oh, come on. Pee-wee Herman kid show? Yeah, they would break away to a Penny animation, and I was thinking maybe that's the Penny they were talking about. And I have no idea why I would think that, but... And that may actually be true, but this icon doesn't imply that. Well, I guess Penny is just not that common of a name. Gex Trilogy, Lollipop Chainsaw Repop. Star Wars Dark Forces Remastered might be a big one. Although the previous Star Wars remasters and releases only get a small amount of enthusiasm. I don't think people stick with them that long. Toxic Crusaders instead of Toxic Avengers might be related to Toxic Avengers, the trauma game. It sounds like it is. But yeah, and maybe I'm misremembering it. Maybe it was the Toxic Avengers. And then Wolfenstein the New Colossus is the weirdest one because why would you... Like Wolfenstein 2, the New Colossus, is not that old of a game, so... And it wasn't a game that was not physically sold before. So they're really just porting it to the Switch. And see, that feels like that is a different focus for limited run games than most of the other games they're talking about, which are limited runs, I would assume, of older games. Inherently, I think we're going to see more and more games that are just technically limited runs or digital only runs. Anyways, Stray Gods, the role-playing musical DLC Orpheus, launches June 27th for all platforms. Let's see this on Steam. Let's see, the thing I would like to know, how well was received was this main game. Overwhelmingly well received. Interesting. So I'll just go ahead and wishlist this since you apparently can't put DLC on the fall list. I don't know why that's the case. Wouldn't be surprised if Steam at some point just tries to get rid of the fall list completely. That would ruin my system completely. No, I'd have to wishlist everything and that would make a huge mess. A Chinese action RPG Fate Seeker 2 is coming to the PS5 on July 4th. Already is on Steam since 2021. Let's see how well. Okay. English is not supported though on Steam. And then this is probably the last story for today, but we'll have to double check. Power Wash Simulator DLC Alice's Adventure Special Pack launches July 2nd. One would assume this is Alice in Wonderland. Again, maybe just put this on the wish list. Alright. So I'm going to just scroll quickly to the end of my tabs and then double tap and scroll quickly to the beginning of the tabs. I did manage to actually stream today without having a bathroom break, so there's something to be applauded there. Of course, I only accomplished that by starting a little bit later than I wanted to, by having a bathroom break before, which is just the right way to do it. Alright, let me just quickly scroll down my Twitter feed. I see somebody cosplaying. Here's a cosplay I can show off as far as an Elden Ring character. That is definitely an example of costume play, in that you are focusing on the costume and the wig and the accessories, and not just barely putting any effort into it and showing off a mostly naked body or half naked body. Not that there's really anything wrong with showing off your body, it's just, is that really costume play at that point? Alright, seeing another Elden Ring cosplay, which we can kind of contrast with this, where this is much more about showing off the face and the back and the arm and the thigh here than it really is showing off this, and this. Although this might be very accurate to what the outfit actually is, I'm not certain. But yeah, I would say there's a lot more skin certainly showing there in that one. And that's not even an extreme example. That's just a YouTube family friendly example of how a lot of these costumes go. Now inherently, a dress like that's not out of place in any way, in my opinion. You would easily see people wearing skimpier dresses than that at formal events and fashion shows and things like that. Weddings, possibly. Don't have as many formal events as we once may have. Not too many balls occurring. Alright, well, that's gonna be it for the stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and keep on watching. Thanks.